The Oak Tarot of Love and Romance by Joe Bandel strips away centuries of occult mysticism to present the tarot as a brutally honest map of human intimacy. For hundreds of years, the tarot has been treated as a tool for divination or a coded encyclopedia of esoteric knowledge. But Bandel's project discards the typical fortune-telling apparatus. Instead, it reframes the 78 cards strictly around relationships, mapping the cosmic and the mundane dimensions of how humans connect. It is a bold limitation that forces us to look at the deck not as a crystal ball, but as a mirror reflecting the many facets of romance, friendship, and internal integration.
The narrowing of focus is what gives this specific deck its power. When you remove the pressure of trying to predict the future or decode Hermetic Kabbalah, you are left with psychological archetypes. Joe Bandel approaches the tarot through a very specific philosophical lens. To understand the Oak Tarot, you have to look at his broader intellectual background. Bandel has spent years translating German literature from prior to World War I, specializing in early fantasy and weird fiction authors like Karl Hans Strobel and Hans Heinz Evers, as well as translating the world's first illustrated fantasy magazine, Der Orchideengarten, which debuted in 1919. He is steeped in narratives of the subconscious, dark fantasy, and the tension between order and chaos. That background in early 20th century German weird fiction seems counterintuitive for a deck centered on love and romance. You would expect someone translating early dark fantasy to produce a gothic or horror-themed deck. Instead, he pivots to themes of emotional vulnerability and the soulmate journey. There is a tension there. Does his translation work actually inform the tarot, or is this a completely separate intellectual pursuit? The connection is profound when you examine his underlying framework, which he calls the Oak Matrix. In his other writings, such as his 2026 book, The Oak Matrix Unleashed, Bandel posits a theory of human evolution that directly contradicts traditional esoteric models. Many occult systems treat human development as a war between opposing forces, light versus dark, spirit versus matter. Bandel rejects that warfare metaphor. He argues that the fundamental engine of human evolution is a relentless, recursive, and loving embrace between chaos and order. That philosophy bridges his dark fantasy translations and his tarot work. The Oak Tarot applies that concept of the loving embrace to interpersonal relationships.
Let us break down how that philosophy manifests in the structure of the deck itself. The traditional tarot is divided into 22 major arcana cards and 56 minor arcana cards. Bandel retains this structure, but reassigns their fundamental purposes. He designates the major arcana as the soulmate cycle. The term soulmate carries heavy cultural baggage. It often implies a predestined, perfect partner who will magically resolve all of a person's flaws. That seems at odds with a system built on navigating chaos and order.
Bandel's definition of the soulmate cycle is not the fairy tale version sold in romantic comedies. The major arcana in this deck trace the cosmic journey of integrating the masculine and the feminine, but that integration must first happen within the self before it can happen with another. It is a deeply Jungian approach. The Fool's Journey, which is the standard narrative of the major arcana, becomes a process of psychological maturation. You are confronting your own internal binaries, your active, assertive traits, and your receptive, intuitive traits. Only when those are balanced within the individual can they authentically engage in the larger external soulmate cycle with a partner. So the major arcana handle the macro-level psychological architecture, the structural heavy lifting, so to speak. But the daily reality of relationships rarely operates on that cosmic scale. Most human interaction is grounded in mundane exchanges, conversations, shared meals, brief arguments, moments of physical contact. If the major arcana are the blueprint for internal integration, how does Bandel handle the day-to-day mechanics of love? That is where his treatment of the minor arcana becomes fascinating. He divides the 56 minor cards into the 4 traditional suits: but he assigns a specific type of love to each suit. The wands represent spiritual love. The swords represent platonic or mental love. The cups represent emotional love. Finally, the pentacles represent physical or sexual love. By compartmentalizing the suits this way, the deck explores the fact that we experience multiple types of love simultaneously, and often with different people or in varying degrees with the same person.
Categorizing the swords as platonic and mental love is a radical departure from traditional tarot. In the standard Rider-Waite-Smith deck, the suit of swords is associated with conflict, sorrow, anxiety, and intellectual strife. The Three of Swords is literally a heart pierced by 3 blades. To pivot from a suit of grief and warfare to a suit of platonic love requires a complete reimagining of the imagery and the underlying message.
It is a radical shift, but it makes sense within his framework of the loving embrace. Bandel has written extensively about his interpretation of specific cards. For example, his writing on the Nine of Swords illustrates this perfectly. Traditionally, the Nine of Swords is the card of nightmares and despair. But in Bandel's framework, it becomes a nuanced look at platonic dynamics. He describes a scenario where a man is learning to relax and feel comfortable around female friends, without the pressure of sexual expectations. Through this platonic friendship, he learns what healthy relationships look like and makes himself a better partner for the future. Meanwhile, the woman in this scenario finds comfort and stability in the platonic connection, a sanctuary from the exhaustion of intense, shallow romantic pursuits. That interpretation effectively neutralizes the traditional dread associated with the sword suit. It reframes mental friction as intellectual intimacy. A platonic friendship requires clear communication, boundaries, and mutual respect, without the masking effects of physical lust or overwhelming spiritual destiny. It requires the intellect, which fits the airy nature of swords. But does this strict categorization, wands for spiritual, swords for platonic, cups for emotional, pentacles for physical, create a rigid system? Human relationships are rarely so cleanly divided. The categorization is not meant to isolate these experiences, but to help the user identify which current of love is active in a given moment. The goal is synthesis. If you draw a pentacle and a cup, you are examining the intersection of the physical and the emotional. The aesthetic execution of the cards prevents the system from feeling rigid or academic. Bandel emphasizes that each card is designed to feel alive and emotional. The images are intended to bypass the intellect and speak directly to the heart and the body. This is not a deck you are supposed to study with a textbook. You are supposed to feel a visceral reaction to the artwork.
That brings us to the actual instructions, or lack thereof, provided with the deck. Bandel's philosophy includes a mandate that challenges the basic premise of esoteric traditions. He writes, "Trust nothing on faith. Keep only what rings true for you." Occultism relies heavily on lineages, secret knowledge, and accepting complex hierarchies on faith. By instructing the user to discard anything that does not resonate with their personal experience, Bandel is democratizing the tarot. He is stripping the authority away from the creator and handing it directly to the user. He's explicitly dismantling the guru dynamic. The Oak Tarot is described as an invitation to discover your own way in love and romance. It requires the user to take responsibility for their own interpretations. This ties back to his Oak Matrix philosophy, which argues that individuals can become the architects of their own reality by synthesizing radical present-moment awareness with chaos. If you rely on external dogmas to interpret your love life, you are surrendering your autonomy. The cards are mere prompts. The meaning is generated by the user's bodily and emotional response. There is a poetic refrain associated with this deck that encapsulates its passive, receptive philosophy. The text states, "The womb is always open. The grove is patient. Let the current flow as it will." The imagery of the open womb and the patient grove suggests a state of profound surrender. In modern dating and relationship culture, The prevailing advice is often hyperactive. People are told to optimize their dating profiles, strategize their communication, and actively hunt for a partner. Bandel's philosophy stands in stark contrast to that optimization mindset. It is a rejection of the industrialization of romance. When you treat love as a puzzle to be solved or a goal to be achieved through relentless effort, you are imposing an artificial order onto a chaotic system. The patient grove implies that nature operates on its own timeline. Growth cannot be forced by pulling on the leaves. Letting the current flow as it will is an instruction in radical acceptance. It means acknowledging the current state of a relationship, or the current state of one's solitude, without trying to manipulate it into something else. But is radical acceptance always the correct approach in matters of the heart? A patient grove is beautiful, but a grove that is never tended can become overgrown and choked with weeds. If we simply let the current flow as it will, we risk becoming passive participants in our own lives. There must be a balance between the receptive surrender of the open womb and the active outward thrust of the wand's spiritual fire. If the entire deck traces the integration of the masculine and feminine, the active principle cannot be entirely discarded in favor of pure patience. The active principle is not discarded, it is recontextualized. In Bandel's framework, the active, masculine energy is no longer about conquering or dominating the environment. Instead, it is about maintaining the boundary of the grove so that the receptive energy has a safe space to exist. The physical and sexual love of the pentacles and the emotional depths of the cups require action and presence. Surrendering to the current does not mean you stop swimming. It means you stop fighting the direction of the river. You navigate the rapids rather than trying to reverse the flow of the water.
This brings us back to the overarching narrative of the soulmate cycle. If a person uses this deck and continually draws cards from the minor arcana, experiencing the daily fluctuations of mental, emotional, physical, and spiritual love, how do they know when they have achieved the integration demanded by the major arcana? Is the soulmate cycle an achievable destination? Or is it merely an aspirational horizon that keeps the individual moving forward?
It is a recursive cycle, not a final destination. Remember that Bandel views human evolution as a continuous, loving embrace between chaos and order. The moment you believe you have achieved perfect internal integration, life will introduce a new element of chaos that forces you to integrate at a higher, more complex level. The soulmate cycle repeats itself. You find harmony with a partner, and then external circumstances change. A loss, a career shift, a crisis, and the relationship must evolve. You re-enter the cycle. The tarot provides a vocabulary for understanding which phase of the cycle you are currently navigating.
It is a sobering, but ultimately grounding perspective. We are culturally conditioned to expect a climax in our romantic narratives. The wedding, the grand gesture, the final declaration of love. But a recursive cycle means the work is never finished. The platonic foundation of the swords must be maintained. The emotional reservoir of the cups must be replenished. The physical connection of the pentacles must be nurtured. And the spiritual vision of the wands must be kept alive. The Oak Tarot serves as a diagnostic tool for those ongoing maintenance requirements, rather than a map to a static, happily ever after.
That is the honest, relatable aspect of Bandel's words. The text accompanying the cards is designed to be simple and true to life. It avoids esoteric jargon because esoteric jargon provides a hiding place from emotional reality. If a card tells you that you are neglecting the emotional needs of your partner, you cannot obscure that truth behind complex astrological correspondences. The message hits the body and the heart directly. It is an invitation to strip away the illusions and look at the relationship exactly as it is in the present moment.
The demand for present moment awareness is perhaps the most challenging aspect of this system. We often live in the nostalgia of what a relationship used to be, or the anxiety of what it might become. By grounding the user in the immediate, visceral reality of the cards, the Oak Tarot forces a confrontation with the now. It asks the user to trust their own intuition above all else, to find their own truth, and to recognize that the capacity for profound connection has always been present within them. The realization that the embrace was always here is the ultimate takeaway of the deck. We spend so much energy searching for external validation or a partner who will complete us. The Oak Tarot suggests that the fundamental mechanism of love, the embrace of chaos and order, the integration of opposing forces, is the basic rhythm of the universe. When we stop trying to control it and start participating in it honestly, we align ourselves with that larger cosmic cycle. It shifts the focus from acquiring love to manifesting it through integration. The Oak Tarot of love and romance transforms a simple deck of cards into a mirror for our most complex vulnerabilities, asking us to be patient, to trust our own resonance, and to let the current guide us. If you found this exploration of human intimacy and psychological integration valuable, share this episode with someone who appreciates a deeper look at the mechanics of love.